There we go. It's slides are up. Did everybody have the chance to read any of the materials I put onto CLE about this session at all? It's a pretty daunting title, Relentless Disruption. What do you think I'm trying to say with this title? Anybody? What is going to be relentless? What can we expect that might be coming down the road in the next decade or so? Any thoughts? You're all super quiet today. Anyone want to make a guess? Climate change is coming. We just don't know how quickly it's coming. Yeah. But that's definitely one of the topics for today. Anything else? Yeah, go ahead. AI. Yes, AI. Again, we don't know how quickly, but it's probably faster than we really anticipate. At least it's faster than I expected, the changes that are taking place. Okay, right then. So here we are. We're actually going to be talking about AI, automation, climate change, and pandemic, even conflict is all part of this, what I describe as relentless disruption. And we're up to session 6, and then next week, of course, is your individual presentations. And then after that, we have a whole bunch of guest speakers. So this will be maybe the last talk I'm giving. It would be, I wanted to start out by just pointing to this book by Italo Calvino. It's called Invisible Cities. And actually, I feel like when I think about ethics and ethical cities, the ethical lens helps me focus on what is invisible within the city. But this book, which is a novel, is about Marco Polo meeting Kubla Khan. And Marco Polo is talking about all the cities that he's been to visit. And each time he meets with Kubla Khan, he tells him about a different city. So it's kind of a really interesting story. And at one point, Kubla Khan, towards the end of the book, says, well, you've been to all these cities. You've seen what's going on in the world. Where do you think we're going in the future? And Marco Polo turns around and he talks about the inferno of living. And he says that it's the inferno of living is not something that will be in the future. He said it's already here. And that the inferno is where we live every day and that we form by being together. So the basic idea is that we human beings constantly create this inferno, and that makes life can make life very, very challenging for us. So I feel like we're entering a period of inferno, or we're in it. We're actually in this inferno right now. And then the question I would like to discuss with you is, how do you navigate that? Where do you find your path forward in such circumstances? You know, I'm now kind of coming towards the end of my career, but you're at the beginning of your career. So you might find that there are all sorts of forces that are going to actually impact on you. And you may already have an idea of what you want to do, but the question is, how are you going to be able to achieve that? How are you going to be able to go forward and achieve your goals, or what are those goals going to be? So I'd like to come to that at the end, but I'd also like you to be thinking during this presentation, oh, what does it mean for me? Or how can I react to that? How can I react to this inferno? But to begin with, what I'd really like you to do is to just get into groups like we did last week, and then with the people sitting next to you, and discuss the inferno of urban living, and then come up in your group with what you think are the 5 biggest issues facing cities. Right. And then after you've done that, we'll go around and get you to just list them. And I'll compare that with some survey work that we've done, so we can see how your issues compare to the issues that were identified by other stakeholders. So is that okay? Maybe we spend 5-10 minutes talking about what you think are, just you get one person in the group, list up what everybody identifies. But if you could just turn around and talk to the people next to you, that would be fantastic. So what I'm going to do now is share some results from surveys that we did when we were working on the ethical cities, and we could compare how your assessment with these assessments. And actually, it's just one second, please. It's really close. So it's kind of reassuring to see that everybody's identifying the same issues. But the number one, I don't know if you can see that, the number one concern that consistently comes up across, these are surveys. So first survey is 19 cities. The second one is that people who took the massive open online course in 2016, then another group that took it in 2017, and then finally in when was that? That was much more recent. I'm sorry that it's been spoiled by you can't really see it properly. I'm going to try and move the camera down. Okay. So yeah, 2021. So actually a few hundred respondents, but number one issue consistently is housing affordability. Now, I also think that that's because most of the people who are taking these courses are from the global north. And so their problems are that actually being able to buy a home. But if you were to do a similar survey, I think in somewhere like, I don't know, India or Bangladesh, I think it would be more like, well, you couldn't do it online necessarily to get these people, but just basically living in informal settlements or slums and struggling to have even housing at all. So housing affordability was number one. And then you see the other issues that keep coming up are poverty, greenhouse gas emissions or climate change goes up and down. And I think that's a kind of a reality because media attention on climate change goes up and down as well. So maybe there's some reflection of that. Unemployment. And then the other issue that goes up and down is public transport connectivity. So that wasn't one that I don't think any of you mentioned. Maybe that's also because here it's really good. Public transport connectivity is no problem at all. But where you live back home, do you have issues with mobility? No? Well, Singapore, you've got great transportation system, but how about Wisconsin? Wisconsin's probably, you need a car, yeah?
Some yeah, they're also not good, and like the bus stops, they just rerouted everything, but they made bus stops that are like in the traffic island in the middle of a busy road.
Oh, okay. Right. But does anybody live in a suburb? No? Oh, you do? You're from Vancouver?
And that's where I live. But like now they built like an extended like SkyTrain that comes to Coquitlam. But
Okay.
even with that, like it's still kind of and then the buses are like never on time and they only come like every 30 minutes. So to get around you need like a car. Yeah. And like to get into like the city you need a car or I guess like SkyTrain, but it takes a while.
Vancouver is also really known for very high house prices. It's kind of really difficult to get to be able to own a home there. But so who actually owns a car then? Can you have a show of hand? Two, just two, three. Okay. Did you keep your car when you came here? You still have it back? Oh, you sold it.
Oh, yeah, no, I got it.
You got it back
I
home.
thought you meant, did I bring it here?
No. I was like, did you sell it when you came over? Not with it. It'd be pretty cool if you brought it here, but that would be, you really love your car. Yeah. Okay. But so you do need your car to commute every day? Okay. How long is your commute?
Well, I walk to school.
Okay.
So,
Right.
but I drive like.
Okay. And is that because there's no public transport? Or is it personal preference of, yeah.
I'm an American, so.
Yeah, okay, right. So you can see why, I mean, I think maybe in America, public transport connectivity is a very big issue. And it's interesting because there used to be really fantastic tram systems in a lot of American cities, but they were all pulled up.
We
Yeah.
still have it.
Okay,
I'm not. Outside.
okay,
They don't have a bus system.
right. So how do you feel about the transportation system here?
See, everybody was hyping it up, and it's awesome. The trains are great.
Right,
But looking at how much money I spent on gas and how much money I spent on trains here, it's pretty similar.
okay.
Yeah,
All
I
right.
gotta finance a car, but.
Mm. Okay, all right, yeah.
I need to sit down. The trains are great.
The trains
But
are
it's
fu-
pretty similar price point.
Okay.
Monorail is good.
right. I mean, as long as the price of oil is cheap, then it's good, isn't
People
it?
rely on that.
Yeah, I mean, if the price of oil goes up, then you're really in trouble, I guess. And Amina, you need a car, do you?
Yeah, I have a car I share with my siblings and my cousins. I live really rurally.
Oh, okay, Right.
And so it's like from my village, there's one bus a day to the town.
Ah, okay.
And that's the only thing you can take another bus or a train from to get to the city.
Right.
And I've never actually seen that bus. before. I don't think it exists. And it's like a 25-minute bus.
Yeah,
Train station.
okay,
Share the cars and like often drive other people in the village as well.
Right. that's
So you need it to get around.
that's very similar to rural Japan, I think. If you ever get out into the countryside, you'll see that there's very limited bus service. And actually, during the bubble period here, they built a lot of like new towns out in the countryside, and they're now mainly elderly people living there with one bus a day. And it's actually worth going and visiting them if you because it's quite shocking to see these towns that were built when the economy was booming, and now they're all sort of how do you say, a bit like traps for the people. They can't sell the houses. They're stuck out there. If you don't have a car, you can't move around. Okay, so here's what's I worry about with this disruption. I mean, we've got the climate crisis. We have these intermittent financial crashes. We've had the pandemic, and now AI and automation is coming down the road. And then put on top of that conflict. So how do we navigate this? And there's lots of writing that's been done, and I think it's really, really interesting. I don't know if you've come across some of this work, but the idea is that the future of work is going to be transformed. That we have to think about robots and the ethics of robots. That we've got automation coming along, and then there's others who say, you know what, don't worry about it. So, for instance, Aaron Bastani, I don't know if you know him, but basically he's wrote this book that fully automated luxury communism is the way to go. That we should take advantage of the technology to free us from work, which sounds kind of interesting. We've been talking about that for a long time, that eventually we shouldn't have to work, as much as we do, the 4-day work, etc. The 4-day week, the 3-day week, etc. And then there are other suggestions that this is an opportunity to introduce things like universal basic income. So what it suggests to me is that the landscape of work is going to be dramatically transformed in the next decade or so. And there's lots of reports that are coming out. I don't know, do any of you read these reports and things like what's going to happen with AI or what's going to happen with automation? Do you know? So it's like okay. Well, when we were doing the Ethical Cities book, we started to dip into it. But what's happened, and that was in 2019, what's actually happened is it's accelerated incredibly. But there's also, the analysis is pointing to the negative side, but also to the positive side. But it also suggesting that there will be certain losers. So it tends to point to male, less well-educated workers who will find their jobs easily automated. Now, think about that, because that has a ramification. What are they going to do? And how do we avoid it becoming problematic to have a lot of young males unemployed in our societies? And of course, it varies by country. But for instance, in the US, there was this estimate that like 25% of US employment will face high exposure to automation in the coming decades. And again, men, young workers, and underrepresented communities. So that's another kind of very challenging aspect of automation. And just looking at this example from, as I mentioned, back in 2019, hello. Back in 2019, this McKinsey was saying it's going to be like 44% of current work activities in Australia could be automated by 2030. And then most recently, it said it's up to 62% of existing task hours. So they're just not saying that it's a huge problem, but they are arguing that 1.3 million people will have to find a different kind of work. And when we first started looking at this in 2019, ChatGPT and all the things that have just piled on us right now weren't around. But of course, the experts in AI knew this was coming. And so they probably have a great idea about what's coming next and yeah, where it's going to take us. Does anybody feel concerned about the impact of AI on their future career? You do. What's going through your mind? Share with us.
I feel like there are no ethical guidelines behind the use of AI.
Okay.
Even in universities, like people, especially like in the social sciences and the humanities,
Right.
and the arts, like you feel like ChatGPT could write better than you can, and people just put in like a little prompt and they can submit the work. And professors also, like some say they can tell when you use ChatGPT, but then people just use ChatGPT and then put it into like another software and then repeat it back into itself. So it changes a little bit and then you read through it and you feel like it's good enough.
Okay.
So it can be very demoralizing for people to be creative and do work. And then if you feel like it can produce a better piece of work than you can, then like why like there's no motivation really to trying. Yeah, and then especially AI is so quick, and maybe companies are prioritizing like efficiency and speed and producing as much as possible with like as minimal effort as needed. Then like the kind of work that we get to do in the future will look very different, I think. It'll be more like, how can we make the AI do the work for us?
Right.
Yeah, and then who's gonna get paid and where does the work go?
Okay. Yeah, that's a really good point. Anybody feel like it's actually super cool that we've got AI and that it's gonna help us immensely? Not worried at all, just excited. You were kind of positive about it, I remember last time we talked.
I was
I have
What do you think? Mixed.
I have thoughts on the potential of it, but very little faith in the execution. I think that people who are currently sort of responsible for pressing the use of AI are not groups of people that I have much trust in the intentions of. I think that it has a lot of applications that could be very good, but very few of them are ones that are actually being targeted for its use. And I don't have much expectation that they will be targeted for their purposes.
Okay, I think that's a great point. It really does depend on the motivations that you can behind it. And we don't have much influence over their motivations, unfortunately. And it might well be, and I think there was an article on the BBC from one of the originators of AI work, who was one that we shouldn't allow it to become something that just makes more billionaires. And that we should try to put it to better use to alleviate the problems or solve some of the problems or even make, let's say, life easier for a lot of us. So yeah, it needs guidelines, guardrails to keep it going in the right direction. Okay, great. Well, let me go back to the slides. I'm also in two minds about it as well. So, for instance, this report about Japan is suggesting it's going to be a big boost to the Japanese economy, and you can see that in Japan they have a slightly more positive view on what AI is all about, and they're even sort of suggesting, is that working? Yeah, that it's going to boost the economy. But for somewhere like Japan, where you're short of workers, having AI and automation could actually be a very positive development there. So we'll have to see. So it's probably like you could imagine that Japan will really embrace these technologies. The other area that's very problematic is climate change, and some of you mentioned that already. So this report is saying that up to 1.4 billion people in 414 cities could find themselves facing high or extreme risks related to, they say, pollution, water supply, heat stress, natural hazards, and climate change. But it's not equal. So, you've got a number of African cities, you've got Latin American cities, you've got Jakarta, Manila, Karachi, Baghdad. But somewhere like London or Paris or Moscow, it's a low risk. So that's also perhaps why a lot of we don't get politicians in those countries really pushing aggressively to try to do something about climate change, because there are some of them who actually think that the risk for those Northern European countries and North America will be quite low. I don't know if you follow the World Economic Forum at all, but every year they put out a risk perception survey report. It's about how many? 1,500 experts from around the world and give their thoughts on how they see the future and all these interconnected risks relating to technology or to the environment, to the economy, and so on. But the view is that 54% anticipate instability and moderate risk over the next couple of years, and only 6% of them felt it was going to be stable or calm. And then longer term, they're even more pessimistic. So 63% expect a stormy or turbulent outlook over the next 10 years, and only 10% expect a calm or stable situation. So that's like a majority of experts are saying we're in for a very bumpy ride over the next decade. And, that's, again, it's that relentless disruption. What do you do? How do we navigate our way through that? One example actually is the change in the high streets. and I'm not sure how it's worked out in your country, but for instance, if you look at the UK, it's very, very high proportion of the high street is boarded up. Bit like this picture here, and quite a large number of big stores have closed down for a variety of reasons. So the pandemic had a big impact, but also online shopping is very significant. Now, you even see that here in Japan. You know, the Shotengai, the shopping arcade, quite a large number of shopping arcades are also struggling in this context. But have you seen something similar in your own towns? Has anybody seen something like that? Okay, that's in the US is similar. What's been going on?
I think a lot of the main shopping streets and like smaller cities, businesses have a hard time staying in business.
Right.
Especially if you go to like the small towns in Wisconsin, but even my city, which is a larger city, like. There are a lot of restaurants and like stores on this like one main road downtown. But even if the restaurant is like fairly popular, they have a tendency to close like after a couple of years just because it's never enough to be.
Yeah, I mean, traditionally, there's always been a fairly high turnover on the high street, but the problem we're having now is that, especially when big stores close down, all of those that are in the same area tend to go as well. And we're seeing this across cities in North America, the UK, large parts of the towns of the city.
They're being like replaced by really big stores. Like we used to have a lot of small mom and pop shops and now there's like McDonald's and like
Okay.
underarm like Nike stores and stuff on this like.
There's actually, it's kind of interesting because if you go to the UK, there on the high street now, you'll see there's no banks because everyone's doing online banking. And then there's betting shops. So places for you to gamble, pound shops, or the grain store, and then charity shops. Those are like the ones that can actually survive in these conditions. It's kind of interesting how the high street is being transformed, but it's also quite worrying because it sort of means that the community is also being detrimentally affected. But who wants to give up online shopping? We all use it. We all do it. We all use Amazon. And I think we're all very happy using Amazon. But the consequence is that it's actually kind of having a major impact on our high streets. So next time you go back home, have a walk around and see if all the old shops are still there. So I feel like you could say that it's the future's here and it's just not evenly distributed. So there may be, what would worry me is if these more and more of the shops close down, more of the town centers decline, and we're not able to address that. And part of related to it is this issue of safety and crime. And then I don't know, are you familiar with Zubov's book on the age of surveillance capitalism? Have you come across it? I really recommend her work. And what she's basically saying is that we've entered a new era of capitalism where the big tech companies are kind of intruding into your privacy. I don't know if any of you feel that is the case. Have you ever had that spooky feeling where I don't know, somehow on YouTube a video pops up on something you've been talking about with a friend, or Google advert appears that have you had that experience? Yeah, I can see you're nodding, and it's sort of like, are they listening to me? Is Google listening? Is Alexa listening to what we're saying, and then kind of feeding that information so that I get an ad appears? And so essentially, she says that that's basically what's happened, but it's a bit more challenging than that because cookies. Yeah. You're
They just store your info.
right. So basically but then they've got your digital profile, essentially. So what you're searching for.
You can clear the cookies and stuff. They don't auto filter stuff.
Yeah. So actually, you need a whole bunch of strategies to kind of protect yourself, your privacy, from those IT companies, yeah. And also it's not clear exactly how much information they've got on you. But definitely cookies, search histories, everything like that, yeah. Anyway, also in order to deal with crime and to ensure safety, we need more CCTV. I didn't realize this until I Googled it, but there's actually like 400,000 cameras in London alone and 4.2 million across Britain. Does that bother you? Not really. I guess they say the answer to it is normally it's okay as long as you don't do anything wrong. But and then the other thing is, well, they're here to protect us. This is for our safety. But I don't know if you know that San Francisco actually banned facial recognition technology. But we're still in a situation where there are other places where they are trying to increase the adoption of facial recognition technology. So, for instance, there was an experiment underway in the UK where the police were using facial recognition technology. They also have technology to track number plates. So, again, this is happening. This is actually sort of impinging on our freedoms, but I guess is it okay? You're fine with it? Okay. The other thing, which is kind of interesting, and this is based on the work of somebody called Stephen Graham, who argues that we're seeing the militarization of cities in the global north and the global south. And his book is called Cities Under Siege. But you start to see things like this, which is, do you remember during the Iraq war, there was a green zone in Baghdad? And the green zone was like a safety area which was heavily protected by the military, and only the military could get access to it. So he's saying you're starting to see things like the green zones appearing in major cities. And so if you ever go to London, there is effectively a green zone around the areas that I've just put in here. Now, what does it look like? You probably can't really see it very well, but this is a barrier. Right, so this is the barrier, and if you go through, it's about, what is it? It's about here. If you go through this barrier, then you're going towards Buckingham Palace. But these barriers are all around that area. So there's barriers here, and there's all sorts of temporary barriers around the Houses of Parliament. Now, those barriers are there for a reason. They're to prevent like a terrorist attack. But we are seeing them increasingly pop up, and it means that a whole area can be closed down instantly if needs be. You probably haven't noticed it if you've ever visited London. You've probably never seen that was happening. But once it's pointed out, then you start to see, oh wow, gosh, there's a barrier just popped up there. And what surprised me a little bit was I was trying to Google just here because I knew there was a barrier, and it doesn't appear on Google Maps and on the pictures there, because the last image is from like 2018 for some reason. So there's also some security control across that area. Now, you would say, okay, that's fine. We need to be careful because there could be terrorist attacks, etc. But it's also a little bit scary that these zones appear. And you know, this is number 10 Downing Street. So number 10 Downing Street has got this amazing fence and then armed police. When I was a kid, you could walk up to number 10. You could actually go and stand outside and take a picture. There maybe were some policemen here, but there wasn't this immense security. So we've got the situation where we have to have more of these checkpoints and fences, security zones, etc. And again, I remember that police were not armed in Britain, and now you will see in airports, etc., police walking around with machine guns. And so we've changed, and we're kind of on a different trajectory. The question is that just unavoidable? Do we just accept it? So this guy, Jeremy Nemeth, has also been doing a lot of research on security zones around Wall Street. And he's basically saying that what we're seeing is gradually these areas that were once open to the public are being closed off. And this has also been taken forward by Anna Minton. And she talks about this notion of ground control. And she's again saying that there's this privatization of urban space. So you could say, well, all of this is a reaction to an unsafe world, to the potential for terrorist attacks and so on. And there have been significant terrorist attacks in these locations, but it's also quite worrying in that we have lost that public space. And we talked about it when John, you remember John was mentioning a right to the city, and he mentioned this notion of secured by design. And what Anna Minton is writing about actually is something which she calls Fortress Britain, is that we're seeing more and more cameras installed, more and more security fences, and so on. And although the decision to do this is a good one, to try to reduce crime, it can also have bad consequences in that you create, these fortress-like locations, or you have to create them. And that again is quite worrying. So and if we go back to Robert Mugar, and you remember he's the guy who wrote about fragile cities. What he's saying is it's within cities that we're really going to have to shape the character of security and development in the 21st century. So what these observers are saying is that the city is changing in front of us, in front of our eyes, and it's changing for a lot of reasons, partly because we don't feel, or we feel certain threats to us, and therefore in order to counter those threats, we have to make these security zones or more CCTV and so on and so forth. But there's not a discussion going on about it. You're not being asked your opinion. So for instance, nobody's asking you what you think about facial recognition technology, are they? So for instance, if I ask you now, all those who think that introducing facial recognition technology into cities is a great idea, raise your hands. How many are going to raise your hands? Anybody? Okay, so we have you're basically saying we shouldn't be doing this, but it's happening. And we don't have any say over how it's happening. Okay, so how are we doing? This is what Calvino says. And again, remember, it's Marco Polo talking to Kubla Khan. And he says, how do you escape the suffering of the inferno? And he says there's two ways. The first way, and this is the easy one for many, is accept the inferno and become such a part of it that you can no longer see it. I think that's what we generally do, right? Because if we are vigilant, if we are constantly aware of what's going on around us, then it actually is quite difficult, challenging for us to, okay, I'm going to protest against the privatization of the city. I'm going to protest against the infringement of my rights by constant surveillance, etc., etc. He said the second is risky and demands constant vigilance and apprehension, is that seek to learn to recognize who and what in the midst of the inferno are not the inferno, and then make them endure and give them space. So I kind of want to talk about that a little bit. Sometimes I wonder if it's you, if you are not the inferno, or you are choosing not to be the inferno. How do we give you space? And I think that from an education's point of view, the task that I feel I have is like, we need to understand the world in which we live, and we need to make our choices. So I will share a lot of examples with you right now. I'd like you to have a discussion in your group for, say, 10 minutes about what do you think we should do? What in this context, or how does it make you think that you should move forward in these circumstances? Or do you just feel like, okay, you know what, can't do anything at all, just have to accept it? All these things are going to come down the road, like climate change, automation, AI, etc. And I'm not sure what I should do. Or maybe you have some ideas of things that you could do. Any questions or comments? Do you think you could just have a chat in your group about that? Whether there's anything you feel like you can do or that you should do differently, bearing in mind that you now know that automation, AI, climate change, and all these things are coming our way. Okay, well, have a chat for 10 minutes amongst your peers.